because I followed it pretty carefully from the beginning. From the initial, when it initially happened, I watched the videos like everybody else. And then I followed the court case pretty carefully. To be truthful, when the sentence was read out and he was found not guilty, it was a huge relief for me and my whole family when we were watching, because I think it would have been a travesty had anything else happened. That's my opinion.
Mhm.
But then I'd see the country is almost split, and you had about half of, I don't know what it is numerically, but it seems like half, and if not more, in the media who felt just the opposite about it. And if they legitimately not followed the case, and the only thing they knew about that case was what they saw watching The View or a couple CNN segments that they watched, and they don't know yet that CNN isn't news, then I could kind of understand that opinion. But if they had followed the case at all and still felt that he should have gone to prison in that particular case, I'm at a loss for understanding what they're thinking. And I'm wondering if you can provide an answer for me on what people like that you think are, what's going through their head.
I think the biggest issue, which is my only issue with everything that went down, was he shouldn't have been there.
Right. But nobody should have been there.
Right. Yeah, this is true. Nobody should have been there. But I kind of, when I look at it, I'm just from a person who focuses on like the avoidance, deterrence, and de-escalation pieces of it all, especially as it pertains to self-defense. Like, don't put yourself in a situation where you have no legal authority. You have no, like, I don't need to be there. You know, like, it's not my job.
I completely agree with you. And
Yeah,
as a
right.
father,
And
of course, I would never want my son to be there, and I wouldn't have wanted him there with a rifle or anything like that. But the flip side, the people on the other side of that will say, well, the police weren't there, the government wasn't there, they had completely abdicated their responsibility to the community and stood down while mobs of violent felons, these were child rapists and wife beaters and everything,
yeah,
were lighting fire to the community. So in that case, is it to the point where people just have to let the city burn then?
no, yeah, and that's a good point. That is the other side of that argument, is somebody needed to protect every, these folks' livelihoods. You
Right.
know, people love to say, use the word business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just a business. Well, you and I both know a business can be your heart and soul.
Yeah.
You've poured everything into building this business, and now random people who probably aren't even from the area are going to burn this thing to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
For what purpose? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and so I get it. I totally get everything from that side. From a perspective of self-defense, I think most telling, Andrew Branca, The Law of Self-Defense, he does a good breakdown on a lot of this stuff, video breakdown and everything, where he goes deep into the legal side of self-defense and its use in all 50 states. He has a book where he breaks down the laws of self-defense in every state, and it's really interesting. I think anybody who does this stuff should read that book, and definitely check out his YouTube. He breaks this stuff down in a very concise way and really just dives deep into all the legal aspects. And that would really help people understand it a lot better, understand what happened and how things went the way they went as far as the ruling goes. If we just look at the situation as it was, the fight itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's getting hit in the head with a skateboard, so that's lethal right there. That's the use of lethal force there. And anybody who would question that, or, you know, serious bodily injury, death, right? Anybody who thinks that I can't hit you in the head with a skateboard and that metal truck or even the side of that board hit you in the head and not cause permanent damage is delusional.
Mm-hmm.
Right there, you know. And then the admission by the survivor of he pointed the pistol at him, raised the pistol, pointed the pistol at him. Right there, again, immediate defense of life is apparent. We have immediate defense of life. There's really nowhere for him to run. He's on the ground. There's nowhere for him to go. At that point, I think we have checked most of the boxes necessary for self-defense. Again, in that microcosm, in that moment, you know, everything that I think or disagree with prior to whatever led to that moment, all of it. I don't agree with anything that was happening up to that point. The rioters being there, you know, all those guys, the guys on the other side of it feeling like they had to go out there armed and defend property. You know, we all joke about the rooftop Koreans in LA after that went down. The Rodney King verdict came down, and people would joke about, you know, make funny memes about the rooftop Koreans and stuff. And but there is that piece of it where if law enforcement has abdicated their responsibility and even been told to stand down, not to defend.
Yeah, I have no doubt they were told to stand down, right? It's not what they wanted to do, probably.
No, of course not. You know, and now, so what are we faced with? What can we do? You know, I'm not inclined to sit back and let somebody burn my house down.
Right.
You know, and so I understand the arguments, all that good stuff. So what we really have to look at is what happened in that little bubble with those 3-4 characters. You know, what went down in there? Impact weapon to the skull or attempted to the skull. That's the threat of serious bodily injury. A pistol directed at him, at the person. Again, death, immediate defense of life. He was armed with a rifle. They can argue back and forth about did he raise the rifle, which caused the other guy to raise the pistol? I'm not sure. What testimony sounds? It sounds from testimony that he raised the pistol.
Right. And
then in response, he raised the rifle. That's by his own admission in testimony. And then he let rounds go on the guy that pointed the pistol at him. At that point, I would think he's justified.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, and the jury.
He wound up in that position because he was being chased down while he was trying to go to the police.
Right. That's the other thing. It wasn't a pure just I'm standing here and this is the line I'm drawing. It is I'm running away and I find myself on the ground trying to run away. And now what am I going to do? You know, and you have to be judged by that moment, you know, not all the other stuff that people want to bring into it. I think if people were to really listen to, again, somebody like Andrew Branca, somebody were to pay attention to like his breakdown on it and some of the other things, and just understand the law of self-defense as it pertains to the United States. A lot of times you have people from Europe and other countries who want to weigh in, and that's cool, but they don't understand how the law works here.
Right.
You know, and I remember talking to a student that came through, it was one of the Scandinavian countries, and he was talking about if he's defending himself and he punches somebody and they fall and hit their head, he's now responsible for their injuries, even though he was the one that was being attacked. And he was trying to explain that to me, and I don't know if that's completely accurate. I don't know if his understanding of their law is completely accurate. But based on what others have said in regard to self-defense incidents in the United States, I would say that there is a distinct difference between our understanding and approach to self-defense versus European countries. And that's part of the problem is when those guys start weighing in, they don't understand those things. Like,
unfortunately, I'm talking about Americans.
Yeah, that's the bad part, right? It's like, well, man, the thing is, I would want Americans to understand the laws of self-defense too, as it pertains to them. Because God forbid they ever need to defend themselves, they need to know if they're moving correctly, you know, within the law. Or are my actions legally justified?
Right.
You know, like that lady, the Walmart shoplifting lady who fired the concealed carry lady who saw them chasing a shoplifter and decided she's going to help by shooting at the guy. Well, you can't do that.
Right.
You know, but those are the kinds of things that lead to people not understanding and making the comments that they make when they see rulings like this come down. They don't understand how the law of self-defense works.
Right.
And
I
so I
don't
think,
think anybody that looks at a guy who's convicted of multiple counts of child rape and who's trying to set buildings on fire and calls him a protester is probably lacking a certain amount of mental judgment to begin with.
yeah,
Around that. But the other piece about it is I don't think I've ever seen anybody that made my skin crawl as much as Binger, the prosecutor in that particular case. He just rubbed me the wrong way in every possible
yeah,
sense of the word. But there was a moment where his chubby partner there, the overweight guy, is talking about how sometimes you just have to take a beating. And I remember watching that when it happened, watching it live and thinking to myself, I don't think that's what Paul Sharp would say.
yeah.
It's just particular advice as a prosecutor that sometimes people just have to take a beating. What would you say to anybody that was naive enough to think that there's some wisdom there?
Yeah, I would say, okay, well, then the next time there's a domestic battery arrest, that's going to be, if I was the defense attorney, that would be my defense.
Yeah.
Right?
Prosecutor such and such said sometimes you just have to take a beating. So she had to take a beating.
Yeah, so it was her turn to take a beating. It was his turn to take a beating. You know, the prosecution even said, this is the state's view on interpersonal violence. The state's view is sometimes you just need to take a beating. And so I want all charges dropped.
Yeah.
I want my client to walk out of here free today. Yes, he beat the crap out of somebody, but sometimes you just got to take a beating. You know, when they say ridiculous things like that, it's like when all those those two girls were fighting and the one girl stabbing the other girl and the police officer responded. You had all these celebrities talking about there was knife fights all the time when I was in school. No, there wasn't. No, there wasn't.
I think that was one of the women that runs BLM there, but she said, well, yeah, sometimes knife fights are just part of growing up, you know?
Yeah, no. Knife fights are part of dying, not growing up.
Yeah.
You know, like people die when knives are involved. So yeah, it's just ridiculousness. And I think what ends up happening is that rather than trying to understand the laws of self-defense, trying to understand the difference between a civil and a criminal action, and trying to increase our understanding of that, what we do is we take the easy route, which is listen to some talking head who even knows if they know what they're talking about,
right,
or how educated they are, and on the subject matter, and we listen to them and go, oh, okay, well, that's my opinion now. You know, I did my research. You know, that's my opinion, and so we just run with it instead of trying to dive deeper in and examine it and say, well, what if I'm wrong? What if my opinion about this is wrong? What if I don't know what the law is? So, you know, I had interesting interaction with somebody when I was living in Illinois about castle doctrine and stand your ground, because that was kind of a big deal at that time. They were talking about the Trayvon Martin, I can't remember the other guy's name, but anyway, they were talking about that issue. You know, Zimmerman Trayvon Martin incident. And they were talking about that, and they were discussing stand your ground, castle doctrine, and all these things, and completely misunderstanding any of it, not understanding any of it, and misapplying, you know, being able to defend yourself in your home with being out in the street, getting into a situation, all these different things. And I just thought, you know, we really should, in school, at high school, junior high level, have a deeper discussion, educational process regarding all these things, regarding civil, criminal, all of it. We really should have some more time on that at that level, because this person was probably 21. They were in college. And so these are opinions that are being formed and cemented into place. Like, this is what I believe. And they're going to carry that forward into wherever and whenever they end up in life. But it just was one of those things where I was just thinking, like, there's nothing I'm telling you right now, all these resources you can go to find legitimate information on these things. All the things that you're telling me that you, like, I wasn't telling them, hey, you were completely wrong. Like, you're so wrong, you can't find right. I wasn't telling them that. Instead, I was trying to point them towards resources. And I talked to him a few days later and go, hey, by the way, did you ever check out any of the stuff I told you to check out? Yeah, but it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No, it does make sense. It's just you have to unplug your bias for a moment and try to examine it with just an open mind and the willingness to accept that maybe you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You know, but yeah, I think if more people understood that, just simple things like the law of self-defense and what does the law of what are the statutes regarding self-defense look like in the state they live in? Mm-hmm. Have they ever even read it? Have they ever even checked it out? Have they ever talked to an attorney that specializes in self-defense? Have they ever talked to that person and found out what can I or can I not do in the place that I spend the majority of my time?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point.